Hollywood has no new ideas. People have been saying this for years with all the sequels, reboots, and spinoffs, but these criticisms got a lot more heated this last week as Disney released a live-action reboot of Moana, a movie from 10 years ago that just got a sequel. A lot of people have been arguing that this represents that Hollywood is just out of creativity, that they got nothing new for us, and we should go back to original ideas in storytelling. What this misunderstands, fundamentally, is how stories are reboots, sequels, spin-offs, and that is the predominant mode of storytelling for most of human history. So, last week, I talked about the Odyssey, compiled by oral bards over the course of centuries in the Greek Dark Ages. And what's key is that it's from this oral tradition where no one is telling the same story twice, which is why the stories seem very episodic in nature. So these people throughout the Greek world are spinning different stories about Achilles, Odysseus, whomever, to their audiences and not really worried about, I don't want someone to criticize me because I'm telling the same story about Achilles that everyone's heard so many times. People wanted to hear the same stories told in different ways. In the classical Greek world, the three great tragedians of Athens, being Sophocles, Euripides, Aeschylus, all wrote about the exact same stories. All three of them adapted the story of Electra. Sophocles and Euripides both had a play, literally with the title. Aeschylus had it play into his larger Agamemnon saga. They also covered the famous Theban saga. Oedipus, Antigone, Sophocles and Euripides both had plays called Antigone. Aeschylus, if he's a bit of the contrarian, he only had her cameo in his own play about Oedipus. And they're literally competing with each other at the big Athenian theater festival, the Dionysia. Audiences wanted to see these playwrights offer their different takes on these myths they knew and loved. 1,600 years later, in 1500 London, Shakespeare is doing much the same thing. Obviously, his historical works are based on British history, the Henriad. He covers mythology, covers Julius Caesar. And even the more original stories, Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Hamlet, were versions of stories that were already out in the world. Romeo and Juliet is based on a poem by Arthur Brooke, itself a previous translation of an Italian story. King Lear is literally a rewrite of an earlier play, also called King Lear, but with an I instead of an A, that was already known to the London theater-going audience. The Merchant of Venice is a particularly blatant example because Shakespeare was riffing off the work of Christopher Marlowe's, this being his contemporary and fellow playwright, already successful Jew of Malta. He even ripped himself off. He spun off the character of Falstaff from Henry IV Part 1 and put him in his own play, Merry Wives of Windsor, because that was what audiences want. All of these playwrights, poets, wanted recognizable characters where people went in knowing the basic story. Very few exceptions that were truly self-contained original works. Now, the big shift comes with the development of the modern novel, which began to situate literature not in the fantastical or the historical, but in the real world, set in the present day, and crucially, introducing a character to the audience. The modern novel has its roots in the 19th century and the arrival of two very key innovations. So, mass publishing, and at the same time, literary copyright, so that artists could keep control of their characters and not see others profit off their work. So, suddenly, you wanted to have characters that were specifically distinct and contained to this world so that you wouldn't have other authors rip you off for the work that you had yourself done. And both put an end to this endless cycle of sequels, reboots. Today's franchises are something of an ungainly combination of these two modes of storytelling. On the one hand, you do have shared universes, you have characters reappearing in different movies, but it's all controlled by one company. It's all controlled by Disney, who has a copyright over these characters, so that you can't make your own stories with Iron Man or Spider-Man or whatever. They're justified in wanting to hold on to it for obvious reasons. If people who are let's just say not as competent, start putting out their own Spider-Man stories into the marketplace, that devalues the IP as a whole. So if they're going to spend so much money on making these Spider-Man movies, they want to make sure that they can keep it as valuable as possible. Marvel learned that lesson the hard way. In the 90s, they sold out the rights to many of their most popular characters, including Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Hulk, to different studios who made their own adaptations. And some of them were good, like the Raimi Spider-Man movies. Most of them weren't received as well, and that devalued Marvel as a brand in general. So what they tried to do with the MCU was put all this IP under tighter control to make sure that other studios couldn't devalue their IP. But when you put all it under direct control, its creators can run out of ideas and get lazy. And this is why Marvel has been suffering declining returns over its last few movies. This is why DC has gone through cinematic universe after cinematic universe attempt and not seeming to work out. And why Pixar is now resorting to remaking a 10-year-old movie. Rather than let other people compete to make their own versions of Moana, their own different takes on the character and the mythology, you're just getting retreads.